The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
We learned a lot after the punishments Michigan State was dealt. Some of it murky, some of it clear.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We still got a lot to clean up here from these allegations that turned into punishments for Michigan State football here, because it wasn't just enough to talk about it for one show here. I want to talk about everything, this whole saga, not just the punishments themselves, but how MSU even got into this mess, what this has really taught us, what this has told us. And for me, it's told us three things. Two of them are murky. Like, one of them I'm really going to need some help on, guys, but one of them is crystal clear. We'll save that one for the very end, because what fun is it just to state the obvious. Now, the first things first, and this was, the big sub-storyline coming out of this punishment, Michigan State's lack of fight, I guess, borderline agreement with this punishment is that, this was possibly a way to get out of just paying Mel Tucker and his, something in the ballpark of $80 million. Now, of course, you might say to yourself, isn't it pretty obvious that this guy was fired for cause? Like, why would they be in jeopardy of paying him this money anyway? Like, what he confessed to, what he did, the damage he caused this university, that should be enough to get you out of that payment, shouldn't it? Look, I'm incredibly far from... Actually, there might not be a person in your life further from being a lawyer than myself, but I do know this. It never hurts to run up the score in the court of law. So is this just another pin on the tail on the donkey as far as court proceedings go? Sure, yeah, very possibly could have been the case here. And look, maybe that seemed obvious because Michigan State, they didn't fight back. Yeah, sure, they voiced displeasure in their statement, but let's all remember, if you want to be real salacious about it, if you want to wear this tinfoil hat and say this, Michigan State self-reported all of this, basically. Now, did they self-report it in order to further themselves from this $80 million payment that they'd have to give Mel Tucker? Truly, who knows? I don't know. Or was it a situation where along the way they're realizing, my God, look at all these things that we are discovering and are about to bring to the NCAA. Well, wouldn't this just be convenient? So, yeah, that's one route that you could look at this, right? Is this why Michigan State was the one that went to the NCAA and they were so forthcoming with all the information? Sure. I guess. But, here's where it gets murky. You still could have had Mel Tucker dead to rights on all this. You still could have had the NCAA come out and say, oh my God, this evidence is terrible. Look at all these level 3 violations. Hey, here's some show causes. Hey, here's some recruiting restrictions. Hey, here's a fine that will barely come out of your bottom line. If you just had that, that's great. The vacated wins, and I get it, save your jokes or save them. It's barely any wins, unfortunately, the last 3 years. Okay, that's where it gets a little too far. Again, are these wins, are these seasons that Michigan State fans are just going to be crying over? Not necessarily, but what? Hold on, what? That seems a little too far. I think you still could have gotten out of all this without such a strict punishment. I mean, what happened was overboard, but I guess it met MSU's goal. So, look, was it worth fighting? I don't know, you had to vacate wins over $10,000 worth of hotels and flights that amounted to 3 kids committing and generated hardly any wins after those kids committed. I guess, especially, and I understand it too from the Michigan State fan side of things, and I was like this too for a little bit, an hour or so, but yeah, we were forthcoming with our information, right? We were very cooperative. These were level 3 violations. Who cares? And also we're getting our wins vacated while the program down the road, they have a multi-year on-field cheating scheme. They destroy their evidence. They don't cooperate. And all the NCAA does is, Guess we can't get them. Oh, well, here's a fine. Here's some show causes for guys that won't have any interest in coaching in college anyway. So, yeah, of course, that's the underlying storyline. And the absurdity gets the cherry on the top, of course. That Central Michigan game. Hey, one team has a guy on their sidelines disguised as a coach that's actually from the other team's rival school. And the other team just playing, a few guys that stayed at the Marriott on Michigan State's dime. And one of those schools had to vacate that game, and the other one just all they had was a few show causes and a fine. It's Looney Tunes. It's crazy. And I guess the saddest realization that I had is obviously, I get fired up when I talk about it, but I don't know if this happened like 5-10 years ago when there was a lot more energy for Michigan State football, when there was something called hope and happiness. I'd be so fired up that I wouldn't be laughing through talking about it, right? Like, I probably would have used this platform right here to call for horrible things to be done for things or for people that work in the NCAA. Like, I would have been fired from this podcast, which would have led to me being fired from my 9-to-5 job for the things that I said, which probably would have led to a lawsuit. But I couldn't care any less past 1 hour after this news dropped. That's how much I've just been crushed the last few years, where whether it's just MSU's product on the field, and yes, I will still watch, I will still root, I still bleed green, but oh my God, there's no hope anymore. There's no energy. And the other half is, that's just the NCAA for you. So, past me, I would have been so angry you couldn't have even believed it. But this one, yeah, I'm definitely annoyed. I was a little peeved for about an hour or two, but I didn't lose a wink of sleep last night, guys. But instead, we're looking within. We're seeing what we've learned from this whole thing. And here's murky thing number 2 is what we have learned. And this is what I need your help on, guys. Is what does this do for Jonathan Smith's future? Because behind door number 1, whew, my God, what a dirty door to look behind here. Look, there's this big buyout hanging over Jonathan Smith. I think that J-Bat would like to go on to the next regime. He didn't hire Jonathan Smith. He wants to go on to the next thing as much as the majority of Michigan State fans do, I think. But by God, is that buyout pretty big? Well, hey, I don't think that this will happen. But, I did hear it, whether it was the radio, whether it was message boards, or, just conversations with friends. Hey, 2024, Jonathan Smith did technically play some of those ineligible kids. Is that enough to get out of some, if not all of that buyout? Now, that's behind door number 1. That would be an incredibly scumbag way to part ways with Smith. But hey, you know what else is scummy? College football. Business. But anyway, I'm more intrigued behind door number 2. Because does this actually cement that Smith will indeed be back for a third year? Now, as much as you don't like to hear it, hear me out. Because, look, what are you selling to the next guy? Hey, come on by. It's a disaster here. We haven't won a Big Ten game in God knows how long if you look at the record books. And even if you do want to count those vacated wins, hasn't been great shakes here. And, to help you get out of that hole, you're going to inherit some recruiting violations, some restrictions, some a notch down in a few recruiting weeks. And our budget's going to be a little smaller. The optics around Michigan State aren't that great. But hey, come and get this job while there are so many other great jobs out there available too. Is this a situation where now things are just in such haywire for Michigan State where actually Smith's, I guess we're stuck together. You're not going to leave us. Why would we leave you right now? We're all we got right now. Let's just see what happens for this next year. So, or is it behind door number 3? Does none of this really matter? And Jonathan Smith will be excused at the end of the season. J-Bat will come up with a $32 million anyway. We'll be able to schmooze some guy despite everything going on. I don't know. That's one storyline that I need a lot of help on forming an opinion on, because it could be any 3 of those doors. Just a real scummy escape hatch. But an escape hatch, solidifying that Smith is coming back, because who on God's green earth would want to come here at this point? Or number 3, is this just this small blip on the radar that will be forgotten about in a week or two?
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for the weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sunday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
BYU basketball starting forward Kennard Davis Jr. was arrested yesterday by Provo police.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Right out of the chute, let's talk about what we know, the facts, as they say. And any of you who may be upset that I'm talking about this, understand that this is a legal matter. This is not honor code. This is not a civil lawsuit. They are different because when it comes to situations like this is a matter of public record. And it involves a car accident because Provo police responded to a car accident at approximately 11:45 a.m. Mountain Time, according to a press release that came from the Provo Police Department. While responding to said crash, officers, quote, found reason, unquote, to arrest one of the drivers. That would be 20-year-old Kennard Davis Jr. for, quote, suspected DUI. That's driving under the influence. Now, Davis obviously is a BYU basketball team member, transferred from Southern Illinois, started the 2 games he has played for BYU, he's been a starter for. He sat out Tuesday night against Delaware with an undisclosed injury. And the situation at hand here is that DUI, it covers a myriad of different things, because DUI means driving under the influence, but it doesn't specify alcohol, painkillers, marijuana, other illicit drugs. So when the facts come out on that, we'll delve more into that. But let's acknowledge right up front right now that this is a really, really tough look for the BYU basketball program, because I can tell you that BYU is very, very cognizant of its image, as they should be, as every university should be. But BYU, being a religiously affiliated institution, obviously sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they pay, a little more attention to how things are being looked at out there among the general populace, as it were. And having a player on one of your most premier programs, speaking in BYU parlance, it's football and it's men's basketball. They are the front and center athletic programs for BYU, Brigham Young University. And to have a player arrested for DUI in the aftermath of an accident, it's not a look they want, speaking of BYU. Now, there are going to be more facts that come out on this. Provo police have told reporters like Jay Drew, etc., that they will release the full findings from the officers who responded to this incident, and it could come out as soon as today, Friday. Now, I will also acknowledge this for those of you who are unaware. I am recording this at approximately 11 p.m. Mountain Time on Thursday night. This is coming out Friday morning early. So in the interim, new news could have come out. So understand that I'm giving you what I have in the moment I'm recording this podcast. There will be developments, and we will cover them as they come right here on Locked On Cougars. But it is a bad look for BYU. They do not want to have stuff like this, especially when it comes to the BYU men's basketball program and all the headlines they made in the offseason, all the waves they made when it came to NIL, adding the likes of a guy like AJ DeBonsa to this roster. Kennard Davis Jr. in his own right was a fairly highly thought of addition that BYU brought in via the transfer portal, because they saw him as a perfect fit as a 3-and-D guy, for lack of a better term, on this roster. What is his status going forward? That remains unresolved. The statement from BYU that we were given in the media said that we are aware of the allegations and looking into the situation, unquote. No definitive declaration of what's going on, Kennard Davis Jr.'s status. Heck, I tried to find out on Thursday night if, in fact, Kennard Davis Jr. was on the team jet that flew to Boston yesterday ahead of their matchup against UConn tomorrow. And I was unable, as of recording this podcast, to confirm if he was or not. That will ultimately come out, I'm sure, relatively quickly, because either he's going to be spotted, in Boston with the team, or we'll find out more information via the proper channels. But let me reiterate, it's a black eye for BYU, and they're going to have to handle this with the utmost care. Now, Could it be DUI for a number of different things? Yes, it could be, but those details are lacking at this time. So you're going to take a PR hit. That's just a simple fact of what BYU is in this modern age of social media. There are anonymous troll accounts who want nothing more, and I'm sure that they're already have been doing it overnight. They're going to be absolutely denigrating, tearing down Kennard Davis Jr., BYU men's basketball, and anything else associated entity-wise with it. So it'll be interesting to see when the ultimate police report comes out, what it entails, why police found fit to arrest Kennard Davis Jr. We'll see what ultimately he faces in terms of legal situations, because he was cited and then released, because a lot of times when it comes to DUI, you are cited, but BYU is really, really careful with all this, because also running afoul of the law of the land is also going to put you in the crosshairs of BYU's honor code as a student, because obviously BYU's honor code prohibits consumption of alcohol, illicit drugs, and the like. So it's a really, really delicate matter, and I don't want to, I'm trying to just play it right down the middle here. I did this with the Jake Retzloff situation earlier this summer. If I was doing a podcast back in the era of Brandon Davies, who some of you, trust me, I've gotten some comments that it feels like deja vu a little bit with the Brandon Davies situation. Understand that I'm just trying to give you the simple facts of what's going on. Now, coming up next, BYU does have a showdown against UConn tomorrow. It's a top 10 matchup. It's one of the premier games on BYU's schedule. I'm talking as a whole. A guy like AJ DeBonsa was very eager to go back home and play in front of his hometown fans, because he grew up about 40 minutes south of Boston in a town called Brockton, Massachusetts. And this obviously mars what should be a celebrated top 10 showdown. And so we're going to step aside from the Kennard Davis situation, just understanding that there is a whole lot of loose ends that are unresolved out there. Understand that, and we will cover them as they come on that front. BYU basketball is going to take on the UConn Huskies tomorrow night, and Dan Hurley was very animated, as he often is earlier this week, talking about the showdown that he is going to have, him and his team, speaking of UConn, have against BYU. And I am fully expecting to see the Dan Hurley of, all Dan Hurleys in this game, because if you've watched any of UConn basketball in the recent past, Dan Hurley is about as animated a coach you're going to see on the sidelines. He'll have his hands behind his back. He'll be barking at people. He'll take his glasses off, rub his temples. He's a character. But it does not preclude the fact that we've got a showdown between two top-tier rosters, accepting the fact that BYU is very likely, I think, to be without a guy like Kennard Davis Jr. This is a showdown that is going to test BYU and show us, I think, a lot of where BYU stands in the pantheon of great college basketball programs right now. The Cougars are ranked 7th in the AP poll. They moved up from their opening week number 8 ranking, whereas UConn, much like BYU, is 3-0 on the season, but they're going to be facing off against their best opponent to date as well. This is a huge, huge game for BYU to kind of establish, okay, this is who we are. Because much like BYU, UConn has played, okay opponents. They played New Haven and won 79-55. They played UMass Lowell, won 110-47 in that game, and then beat Columbia out of the Ivy League 89-62. They have not been tested to this point. In fact, I would say the best game between the two programs that's been played to date is BYU's win opening night against the Villanova Wildcats, and it's by a good margin in terms of just looking at name brand recognition, Ken Palm rating. You get what I'm talking about. This is an intersectional game that is going to show, I think, really what BYU is made of. Because if they can go toe-to-toe with a UConn Husky squad that has got championship DNA in it, and even you who know the history of UConn know that guys like Jim Calhoun, Kevin Ollie, and obviously most recently a guy like Dan Hurley have led them to multiple national championships. This is one of the premier basketball programs, a true blue blood in every sense of the word, and BYU gets a crack at them to show if BYU is going to kind of run in those same circles this year. We had AJ DeBonsa, who's playing, it's a home game for him. He's coming home to Boston to play in front of a bunch of family and friends who I'm sure will show up. And he said it in the Players Tribune yesterday that his goal is to win a title at BYU, and he's got one season to get it right, because This is a kid that he's headed to the NBA lottery after this season. He has proven already to be a premier talent. He's absolutely unstoppable against the opponents BYU has played so far, but this is a different level of game. I would expect that TD Garden, obviously the home of the Boston Celtics, is going to be chock full of NBA talent evaluators, whether they're scouts, team presidents, GMs, whoever it is that pro personnel evaluators are going to be crawling all over that place because they want to get a look. Okay, AJ is considered to be at worst a top 5 talent in next year's NBA draft. I still think he's the odds-on favorite to be the number 1 pick, but that may be just me from my vantage point as a BYU analyst saying that. But he gets a crack at a roster and a team in UConn that they're going to have NBA personnel saying, okay, let's see what he can do against these guys. He got a little bit of that, obviously, in the preseason when BYU played their game in the Delta Center against North Carolina, but it was an exhibition and obviously did not count in the actual standings. But there were dozens of NBA personnel there for that game to watch it. There were dozens also in Las Vegas for the Villanova game. And if those games can attract that level of, in terms of NBA personnel showing up, this game against a top 5 opponent for BYU as they are inside the top 10 themselves, it's going to like double or triple in terms of what the personnel will be there because they want a firsthand look at how a guy like AJ, excuse me. I had Kevin Ollie on the brain still. They want to see what a guy like AJ can do against a roster and a program that's got championship quality DNA in it. And that is going to be the interesting part about this. Now, BYU needs Rob Wright. They need Richie Saunders, Dawson Baker, Keba Keita. They've all got to step forward and play their best game to date. I saw some very promising signs, especially in that second half Tuesday night as BYU ran away from a Delaware squad that I think tested BYU more than anybody, yours truly included, thought they would. Because when you race out to a 10-0 lead, you're up 17-4 at one point in the first half. You're like, what is BYU doing here? They're sleepwalking through this. And I credit it to BYU was looking ahead to this game. I got no problem saying it was BYU was like, okay, Delaware, okay, whatever. No, they were focused on UConn. And to their credit, they found a way to grind through it and run away in the second half. I saw promising signs in the second half, renewed emphasis on the offensive glass, improved three-point shooting, especially from a guy like Richie Saunders, who is going to be, I think, BYU's premier three-point shooter this season. There's a lot of positive signs coming out of that game, but now the level of difficulty gets ratcheted up to a whole nother level. And that's what I'm most interested to see is how BYU absorbs this level of pressure, because these are the games that people are going to evaluate this season for better or worse on. And it doesn't really matter how other games go. People are going to look past Delaware. They're going to look past the Villanovas. But when you have an intersectional game, top 10, top 5 opponent like UConn, a lot of people are going to sit up and say, okay, heard a lot about this BYU squad. Let's see how they do against a team who's won a national title in the last few years. Let's see what they really are made of. And it's a chance to either show that, A, BYU is that level of team. Kevin Young has absolutely established himself and established BYU as one of those powers in college basketball. Or if they fall, some people say, see, they're not there yet. There may be a cut below, but they're not on that top shelf level quite yet. That's what we're looking at in this game. I'm excited for it. I think this is going to be a fun game to watch.
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for the weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sunday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
You are Locked On USC, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans.
The Trojans and the Hawkeyes, though, they played each other since then. I think 2019 Holiday Bowl. All I remember was some guy named Smith Marset literally going through the Trojans like a hot knife through butter. That final score was 49-24. In fact, it was actually a pretty good game until Slovis had to leave with an elbow injury. So, Trent, last week, you guys suffered one of those gut punch type of losses to Oregon.
Mhm.
And again, and maybe it's just me, but aren't all of Iowa's losses close punch of games?
Well,
I guess. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, it's kind of funny this week because the big narrative after another tough loss, the two most difficult ones this year of the three losses
Right.
being just a whisker away from beating Oregon, same thing against Indiana. We know how good both those and talented both those teams are. Is Iowa's now lost 12 consecutive games against ranked opponents. And the difference, though, is for the beginning part of that losing streak, they haven't been like this. 2 times in the Big Ten championship game, getting blown out by Michigan, getting pulverized last year by Ohio State. And I have taken it this week that, it still sucks to have this losing streak, right? You want to end that losing streak and get that negative connotation out of there, but it feels so much different than having no chance going into games. I was right there. I was close. And with a bounce here, a bounce there, this team is 8-1 going into this football game, and we're having a completely different conversation. Mark Gronowski leaves the game against Indiana. The backup quarterback can't complete a screen pass on 3rd and 5. If he does, they got a chip shot field goal to win the game. They don't. Missed field goal on a long field goal. And we know what happened as Indiana came down to score. And then, of course, you saw what happened a week ago. So this team is incredibly close. But yes, there was a lot of those blowouts during that. And now it feels like Iowa, they are taking steps forward here and getting back to that competitive nature that I think historically people think of Iowa football.
Well, you know what? I can relate to that. That was the story of USC last year. They were close in every game. They held leads late in the fourth quarter of every game, except for that game against Notre Dame at the Coliseum, which they were driving to tie the score, and then all of a sudden things changed. So let me ask you this question, since we can both relate to being close but getting no cigar at the end. What do you anticipate from the Hawkeyes in LA in the rain, which you guys are pretty familiar with, against a USC team that's they're fighting for that playoff berth right now? They're 7-2, and everything's there right in front of them.
There's a lot of when you're kind of building up the chances for Iowa. I think there's a lot of negatives in this game, and one of the biggest ones is the way that went last week against Oregon. Listening to the players on Tuesday during the media availability, and we just get guys once a week. We don't get opportunities to watch practice like I think you guys do at USC. So our time is really limited of what we get. That's Fort Ferentz. He's got things covered up there, and we're not allowed very often. But when we do on Tuesdays, I think you still heard a very down nature. You heard a team that was still frustrated. Mark Gronowski said, he's never lost 3 games in his career. I mean, you look at South Dakota State, you look at the high school level, that guy's never lost 3 games in a season ever. And here he is with 3 losses already this year. So I think they're down, but I will go back and maybe bring the positive spin from the Iowa angle.
Sure.
One of Kirk Ferentz's greatest strengths, I believe, as a football coach is not the X's and O stuff. It's not the longevity, not the offensive line, which he's a guru at. It's not that. It's his ability when a team back against the wall, nobody believes in them after a devastating loss like that. The even keel nature that he is as a person and as a football coach is his strength. There's been so many times in the past where it felt like they're going to get beat twice. Don't let Oregon beat you twice. And this one kind of feels like that. And if it was almost any other coach, I think that might be a problem. That is one of Kirk Ferentz's greatest strengths, though. They are so even keel as a football team that I don't think that'll be the reason that they lose. Will there be other reasons they can lose Saturday? Absolutely. I don't think that'll be the reason, though.
Look, there's a reason he's stuck around for as long as he has. And I get it. Midwest is a lot different than LA, the spotlight and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if USC would. Let me just put it this way. I think it's abnormal to have head coaches stick around for as long as Kirk's been at Iowa.
And
win or lose, just sticking around.
Yeah, Hayden was there before him from 78 until 98, so 20 years before that. So I'm in my mid-40s, and I only know 2 football coaches. I mean, think of that. I'm 45 years old, and I've only seen 2 football coaches in my life as a Hawkeye fan. It's unthinkable, but that's our reality. Now, expectations, I think, at Iowa are a little bit different at USC. It's the consistent winner that he's built. Ferentz, that's another thing that you have to credit. You see the pro. I mean, you guys have dealt with it yourselves. And there just aren't those lulls. When you go through and you look at during this tenure and after year number 3, when he got him to a bowl bid, they have been bowl eligible 24 out of 25 seasons. Yeah, 6 wins isn't a great benchmark, but at a place like Iowa, it's a pretty good place to be. Now we're waiting for that breakthrough moment, and we're hoping it'll come Saturday in the rain.
Well, we're hoping it doesn't, but hey, that's why we're doing this. Well, let me ask you this, because we want to accentuate the positives that Iowa has. Tell USC fans about, because these are the 3 players that really worry me.
Okay.
Concern me. You've got Caden Weegan, you've got your running back Kamari Moulton, and then everybody knows about Mark Gronowski. There was actually USC was kind of looking at him, bringing him in before he chose Iowa. Who else should USC be concerned about on offense besides the offensive line? But are those basically the 3 players that USC should be concerned with?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. The tight end position's been hit hard by injury this year. Probably their best guy right now is a former walk-on redshirt freshman. And you guys are running back, know a little something about walk-ons. Doesn't mean they're bad, as we obviously know. And I think he's going to be the next in line of Iowa tight ends as you see them filtered around. DJ Vodemy is his name. He had on that 93-yard drive that gave Iowa the lead in the 4th quarter. Remember that 40-yard pass down the field? He was a kid that got behind the defense there and made the big play there. Now, he's still young. He's still got a long ways to go, but you're looking at upside and looking down the line, maybe playing, a Big Ten fantasy league. He might be your tight end next year in his sophomore campaign. He's going to be a good one. The wide receiver group is not good. I mean, let's be frank. It's just there aren't anybody that can blow the top off. Their best wide receiver probably throughout the course of the season has been Sam Phillips. He's listed at 5'7". I mean, listed at 5'7". So that shows you his height. He made a big catch on the sideline against Oregon. They've got Reese Vanderzee back. He's another big wide receiver that's been injured for most of the season. 6'4" kid, had a touchdown against Minnesota. But yeah, you mentioned the guys that I think are most important. And Gronowski, I think people see what he's done with his legs now. 13 rushing touchdowns this season, how good he's been there. The question is, and our friends over at FanDuel, take a guess, Mark. I don't know if you saw the prop market for this one. Over under Mark Gronowski's passing yards coming up this weekend against the Trojans.
Well, see, this is interesting because one of USC's Achilles heels on defense until recently has been their secondary. So I will say that Mark Gronowski will still not get 200 yards this year in this game, but I think he will be north of 150.
Well, you're right in the right range. It was what I looked on, I think it was Wednesday morning that I looked, it was 160.5 was the over-under for his passing yards. Now, the other element is going to be the rain, and that's something that I'm going to be interested about too.